Hey guys, my next several videos after this will probably be dedicated to things other than Burning Abyss, but before I move on to other topics, I wanted to go ahead and give you a more budget deck profile. My last deck profile of Burning Abyss Orcust is very expensive, at least by a lot of people's standards, so I wanted to give you a list that is less than half the price of that one and is still pretty strong, can still do a lot of the great things that that deck can do. I'm going to go over some options for upgrading the deck and talk about what you should prioritize if you're looking to upgrade the deck past this budget version. And if this deck is still not budget enough for you, I can quickly go over some cards that are probably somewhat cuttable, what's not cuttable, etc. So let's get into it. Of course, much like last time, same Burning Abyss lineup: 3 Farfa, 2 Skarm, Graf, Seer, Barbar, Alcab, Libic, and Alec. All these cards are pretty cheap, Farfa being the most expensive, I believe. Really just solid summon 2 Burning Abyss monsters, you have combo. So, of course, playing all those. Playing the 1 Tour Guide, pretty cheap card, there's like a 20-cent copy. And the triple Fiendish Shrine of Warrior, again, there's like a 20-cent copy of it. The main deck Orcust cards themselves: the 2 Orchestrated Nightmare, 1 Harpour, and 2 Simple Skeleton, all pretty cheap. You know, they're like rares or commons, so they're pretty accessible, and they let you do a lot of really fantastic plays. I still believe that this is the most meta, most powerful version of Burning Abyss that's currently available. 1 Ancient Cloak and 1 Silent Boots. These have been reprinted a couple times now, so they're pretty cheap. Triple Defrag Dragon, a really great Dark Attribute level 3 extender. Discard a card, or send a card from your hand to the graveyard. That's an important distinction. Special summon it. Really flexible, super cheap common. Psychic Wielder. This is one of the more expensive main deck cards. It's around $6, but it's a really good level 3 extender, and the reason we play it, in addition to the 2 tracker, is that you can only use one of each one's effect per turn, so you try to want to minimize opening multiple trackers, so we're mixing it up a bit. 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. This is the best trap card in the game currently, by pretty much most players' opinions. It's also level 3, which can come in clutch with some brickier hands. I would say this deck is still quite consistent, but without the danger cards. You do occasionally run into hands where you have just Ash Blossom and then one of these other level 3 extenders, and Ash Blossom can really get you out of a sticky situation, being that second level 3 that you need. For spell cards, we have Foolish Burial, just really flexible extender and play starter. 1 Orchestrated Babel, standard for combo. Triple Called by the Grave. This deck is a little more fragile to hand traps than other Burning Abyss variants, so we do want to keep this card in the main deck if it fits within your budget. Double Fogblade for combo. It's about $4-ish. Unfortunately, not as cheap as I would like it, but obviously quite necessary considering the variant that we're playing. Shade Brigadine, about $1.50, and the Orcust Crescendo, of course, setting it with Galatea, pretty cheap, super rare as well. For the extra deck, and this is where there's a couple more expensive cards in here. First of all, the Beatrice, of course, you know, this is like a $6 card, $7 card. But of course, we're playing Burning Abyss, so we want to play Beatrice. The Dante to make the Beatrice. Overload Dragon, I think, is a pretty good substitute for Boral Sword, at least when you're talking about budget. Yeah, it doesn't have the same OTK power, but it is a really solid link 4 that can deal with threats and just generally threatens the board in a way that Boral Sword sort of does as well. Pelagic Bomber Dragon, I don't run this in my non-budget version of Orcust Burning Abyss, but I know a lot of people do just play this card normally, and it's relatively cheap for kind of a generic link 4, so I've put it in here. Really good for going first or second, depending on your matchup. 1 Rusty Bardiche, not the cheapest card, it's $4 or $5, not too bad though, and staple. Pelagic Trisbana, $7, but I think it's a really great card this format still. I still like to carve out the space for it in my Burning Abyss extra deck, just because there are quite a few decks running around that run a lot of spells and traps in their back row. 1 Decode Talker is a generic Link 3 that's really cheap. Cherubini is the most expensive card in this deck, I believe, running you about $25. Unfortunately, pretty much no matter what variant of Burning Abyss you're playing, you're going to want this card. So it's just sort of a necessary cost now to modern Burning Abyss decks. It's an absolutely fantastic card, one of the best in the game at the moment, in my opinion. Any 2 level 3s is your Orcust combo, and it's really the heart of this deck. Playing Long Girsu, again, a card that I don't run in my non-budget version, but some people do in their fully built Orcust decks. It's still a great card. There's some variations of combo endings where you can have this card. Clearly, we're not having Dingirsu in this budget version. I'm sure you've already noticed. So this is not as good as Dingirsu. You can get 2 pops with Dingirsu. You still get 1 with this card, and I think that's sort of a decent replacement that is $30 cheaper. Double Galatea for the combo. Again, pretty cheap. 1 Nightmare Phoenix gets rid of back row. You can use it for Mermaid. Cerberus, use it for monsters. Use it for Mermaid. And of course, Double Mermaid, really cheap card, and it starts your combos. So this deck, in total, if you have absolutely none of these cards, none of them, you're starting from scratch, main and extra is around $130, which is very, very cheap compared to the non-budget version that I posted about a week ago. Quite a bit cheaper than every meta deck that we have right now. Still really solid, does a lot of the same things. Not quite as consistent, not quite as powerful, but I think it's pretty comparable for the price that you're paying. If it's still above your budget, some things to consider. Again, going back to the Wheelator, it is about $6.50. Emergency Teleport, which you can use to just summon one of the trackers, is, I believe, $1.50, so you can save $5 if you want to by playing Emergency Teleport instead. Ash Blossoms, 7 apiece, so $21 of your 130 are actually just going into these 3 Ash Blossoms. The common copies are $7. Unfortunately, I don't feel that they're super replaceable, because the 2 best hand traps this format are Ash Blossom and Effect Veiler by far. Unfortunately, Effect Veiler is not level 3, and again, like I mentioned earlier, there are definitely situations where going first, you have to normal summon the Ash Blossom. I think it really helps with the consistency of this deck in the absence of danger cards. If you're going to replace this card, I think, unfortunately, since Ghost Ogre is not much cheaper, you may have to just go for more combo extenders rather than hand traps, which does slightly weaken your deck going second and just gives you fewer answers to cards like Artifact Sanctum, just stuff like that. It's just such a versatile card. It just deals with just so many problems. But if you really want to cut, $21 out of this deck, if you don't already have Ash Blossoms, that's a really easy way to do it. That already gets you close to $100. Call by the Grave is $4 or $5, so that's another $12, $15 in the main deck. Again, that's a fairly major boss that is technically cuttable. I don't like not running Called by the Grave, but if you're really committed to playing this deck, but you just don't quite have enough money to buy everything in here, Called by the Grave is not a core part of the engine, so it's reasonable to cut that if you need to. Borload is around $8. Again, a card that you don't really like to have to cut after you've already cut Boral Sword. You've already gone from $72, $73 down to $8. But if you're really trying to get under 100, maybe even under 90 or 80, this is one of the cards that you can cut as well. Now, going into kind of upgrades, so what is this deck missing from the other profile, and what is the priority with which you should upgrade this deck? So first of all, looking at the main deck, the only thing you're actually just straight up missing that I had in the other profile is danger cards. So it's Tsuchinoko and Jackalope. The level 3 ones are the most important ones. You want 3 copies of each, preferably. You can also run Nessie if you want, but I find that significantly less necessary. In fact, in testing since I've posted that deck profile, I'm iffier and iffier on Nessie by the day. So don't feel pressured to buy that in any way, shape, or form if you're under a budget. But if you really want to splurge, if you're, your paycheck's coming in and you really want a strong deck for Nats or whatever, Tsuchinokos and Jackalopes are the main deck needs that you need. So definitely not necessary for the deck to function, but makes it a lot more consistent. That's the main thing. Just good extenders. I would put these lower priority though. So something that you need to consider when upgrading this deck is what's going to be reprinted soon. So danger cards, Boral Sword, and Unicorn are all going to probably be reprinted in the Mega Tins. So you may want to actually hold off until August or September. I forget exactly when the Mega Tins come out, but it's around then. So you may want to hold off for these cards until then. So something to keep in mind. Or Dingirsu, the Orcust of the Evening Star. So this is a really, really strong card in Orcust. Obviously, both effects are extremely relevant to the deck. $35. I think this is the highest priority card for you to upgrade to. It's one of the cheaper cards on here. Not the cheapest, but cheaper. Tsuchinoko's 50, Boral Sword 72. Unicorn's about the same price. Dingirsu just adds so much to your deck going first, and even going second, it's pretty decent, just getting that extra pop. Or if you have Rusty Radish on the field, 2 pops. Breaks boards, prevents your opponent from making a board against you, just all around, such a fantastic card. It's also not getting reprinted in the Megatins because it is a part of Dark Neostorm, so keep that in mind. The value of this card is likely to hold for quite a while, so really good investment there. Boral Sword. Again, if you're going to play this deck, at WCQ and you're trying to top or something, I think you need this card definitely for going second. That being said, if you, aren't really trying to maximize your success with this deck, this is a budget profile after all. We're trying to play within a budget, not necessarily the best list we can. I would stay clear of this. I would not touch it. This is probably the last upgrade I would possibly make, just because it's so expensive and it's going to get reprinted. This card could easily halve in price or more once the Megatins come out. Avramax, this is probably the least necessary upgrade. A lot of people don't run this card. Some do. There was a topping deck somewhat recently that did. I really like the card in the Sky Striker matchup, but Boral Sword and Pelagic Bomber Dragon are both actually perfectly fine in just like a normal list, even if it was non-budget over Avramax. This is the cheapest card of the upgrades. It's only about $16, $18, but again, least necessary, so do whatever you need to do. If you want just kind of a cheap little upgrade, if you feel like Borload or Pelagic Bomber are not quite what you're looking for, then you could look at this card. It's also sort of does some similar things that Boral Sword does, just because it gains attack when it's battles a special summon monster. There's a guaranteed 3k damage when you attack with it. So if you're looking for a middle ground between investing in Boral Sword or sticking with the 2 I have in the base deck profile, Avramax is another way to go in that regard. And finally, we have Nightmare Unicorn. This is about $30. It is maybe the most generically useful card of all of these. It can be applied to pretty much every single deck. Almost every single deck plays this card. I think it's quite important. I have Decode Talker in over it, which does not even close to the same thing. There's just nothing like it, really, which is part of the reason it commands such a high price. A generic Link 3 that sends a monster back to the deck is incredible. Hopefully you would already have this card. It's pretty staple, but if you don't, another card you might hold out on just because being reprinted. So if you want a card that is, not necessarily just for this deck, but for your entire collection, for all the decks you're going to be playing, Unicorn is likely the most applicable to all decks. So if that's what your prerogative is, Unicorn's a pretty good investment. Alright, I know I've rambled on a little bit here towards the end talking about the upgrades, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll be back with a non-Burning Abyss topic next time. I will see you then. Bye.